The other day I read another one of those articles. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the sort of article that tries to argue that, hey, the Star Wars prequels weren't really that bad. No, it's true. The Star Wars prequels aren't Transformers bad. They're not Man of Steel bad. They're not Twilight bad. They're not as bad as many of the other movies that I've panned on this channel. But yes, they are bad. Now, I don't think I could possibly explain it as well as the Mr. Plinkett reviews on Red Letter Media, so there is a link in the description to the Red Letter Mr. Plinkett reviews if you have never seen those. If you have any interest, if you really loathe the Star Wars prequels and you want to see someone tear them apart utterly, then I would recommend that. But this particular article was on Slate, and the guy was basically saying, look, I got like a 5-year-old kid, and I showed him the original trilogy, and I didn't want to show him the later movies, but finally I gave in, showed him the prequels, and my kid loved the prequels just as much as he loved the original trilogy, and that's what it's all about. It's all about the children. You know, these movies are for kids. Now, Mr. Plinkett already covered that pretty well. There's a lot of stuff that is in the prequels where if it's made for kids, then why is there all this BS about politics and all this boring and dark stuff that really confounds the idea that these movies are for kids? But I hate this excuse, because this excuse is basically a cop-out for bad filmmakers and lazy writers. Now, Douglas Adams once said that the trick to writing Doctor Who was to make it simple enough for adults to understand, but complicated enough to hold the child's attention. And this kind of balancing act is something that people who seem to make modern movies like Transformers and other movies that are going back to things that happened in the 70s and 80s, and therefore are pretty much guaranteed to attract an adult audience, and then they're copping out by saying, well, these movies are just for kids, it's for kids. Fuck you. Fuck you if you can't write a movie that appeals to both kids and adults at the same time. Now, there are plenty of kids movies that are great movies, like the Toy Story movies come to mind. Yes, the Toy Story movies were made for kids, and they are great movies. Alright, the original Star Wars movies, you can argue they were made for kids, and they're better than the prequels. Children are pretty much going to be amused by lasers and lightsabers and explosions, right? Children they're not very demanding. So to sum it up, I really think that it comes down to good writing versus bad writing. You can make a movie that appeals to children and has all the elements of explosions and lightsabers. It's not that hard to amuse kids, especially young boys, with lightsabers and lasers. But you need actual solid writing to make the plot good enough to entertain adults as well. That's not to say that it has to be some sort of cerebral, complex masterpiece, but the list of movies that simultaneously appeals to children and adults is so long that it's ridiculous to try and say, oh, they're not that bad because 5-year-old kids find them amusing. That's a cop-out. And to refer again to the Red Letter Media Reviews, I think what it really comes down to with the Star Wars prequels is that George Lucas had just reached a point where no one was really going to tell him no. Like the movies needed like a script doctor. They needed someone to go through and be like, wait, this doesn't make sense. This is bad dialogue. This is this is convoluted crap, and you need to cut this, and you need to cut this, and you need to completely rework this story. But he was George Lucas. He could pay for the movies himself out of pocket. So whatever. No one questioned him. No one said, hey, you seriously need to rethink and rewrite this story. And it just went through as is, and that's, I mean, the results are just like half-baked. So that's all I have on this subject for now. Leave me a comment on this web zone if you want a pizza roll, and I'll email you a pizza roll. Anybody want a pizza roll?